Attention forward drivers, welcome to the Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast. This is where the real stories roll, straight from the blacktop.
Breaker 19 villains, you got your ears on. Turn that squelch down and the volume up. You're tuned in to the Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast. I'm your host, Tony. It's Sunday, October 5th, and this is episode number 31. I recorded this one in Birmingham, England, but with recovery, ride-alongs, and travel, I had to delay getting it out a little bit. So 3,500 miles from home, I was recovering from a shoulder procedure that would have cost me about 30 grand back in the States, but it's only about 500 quid here in England. Funny how getting a little distance can save you some money and also get a little clarity on some of the math that just doesn't add up. We're kicking off with some more Birmingham music this week. A song called Birmingham by the Broken Witt Rebels. A song about finding your feet in the same place that you'll lose your teeth. Sounds like trucking to me, villains. This week we're diving into the mathematics of BS, where 2 plus 2 equals whatever they need it to. And speaking of math that doesn't add up, here's a quote from Upton Sinclair this week. It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And the other one this week is from Socrates. I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. And that's what we're doing in this episode. Not teaching, just making everybody a little uncomfortable with their undefined terms and fuzzy math. On the bulletin board this week, we're going to break down a LinkedIn conversation that's kind of emblematic of not defining your terms. In the drive line this week, we'll recap what Mike, Ritzema, TJ Graff, and Will Cook showed us about the real equations nobody's wanting to acknowledge. And then we're going to start exposing that crystal palace that I've been talking about. That perfectly rational system where humans are the problems to be solved. From an English operating table to Villa Park, I've been looking at the American trucking math from the outside for a couple weeks. No interview this week as I get caught up and reset where we're headed for the upcoming discussions. Don't forget to hang around for the post-trip. I'll talk a little more about what happened on the rest of my trip. Loose leaf vlogs only for this episode. If they aren't going to use honest math, why should we? We've got work to do. If you're not driving, it's a great time to like, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends.
Paper breaker 19, can I get a radio check? Pretty quiet out here on Channel 19. Well, there's a plain white rapper taking pictures at the state line. Hit the jake brake quick, we ain't paying no fines. The driver swing into the interstate, body shop south at exit 5. Building trucking ain't the same as it was. We're the last of our kind.
At the Mid-America Truck Show, I had the fortune to meet up with Mike Barber, founder of Truckers Wealth. Both of us have a passion for understanding the uniqueness of truckers and sharing our knowledge wherever we can. Mike is a seasoned financial professional. He has over 20 years of dedicated experience serving the trucking industry. Truckers Wealth has created a specialized financial hub where truckers can receive expert advice and tailored solutions to build wealth, minimize taxes, and secure lifetime income for themselves and their families. Check out his website, truckers-wealth.com, and look forward to seeing him on the program here soon. Grab that safety vest. It's time for the pre-trip. All right, villains, let's kick off by talking about why we're rolling with this Broken Witt Rebels song, Birmingham. I'm literally in Birmingham, recovering from surgery, and this song captures something essential. You find your feet in the same place you'll lose your teeth. The tension between finding your identity and being broken in the process. If that isn't trucking, I don't know what is. We learn this business the hard way a lot of the time. We find out reality is quite a bit different than what's in the brochure, and it costs us a lot. We lose our teeth metaphorically. By the time it's done, it can be from boots to the face, or just a gradual wearing down over time. Sometimes it's swift and catastrophic. More often it's mile by mile, week by week. That Yardley darling dancing on the tables but can't make ends meet in the song? That's every driver performing freedom of the road while their bank account tells a different story. That broken blue nose, that's poetry in motion, that's us, beat up but still moving. And that fallen kingdom, what was it for? That's the question that hits different when you're watching American trucking collapse. What was it all for? The deregulation, the race to the bottom, the driver shortage narrative that never ends. The math struggles to add up when you take a true accounting. And that's what this episode's all about. Real math and exposing the math of BS. They're singing about post-industrial Birmingham, but they're telling our story too. Industrial cities, industrial trucking, both finding their feet while losing their teeth. From Birmingham, UK to Birmingham, Alabama, from the black country to the black top, same mathematics of extraction, same fallen kingdoms, same workers wondering what it was all for. It's a beautiful song, so give it a listen. We've got 2 quotes this week that work together like a 1-2 punch. First up, Upton Sinclair. It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. Now, Sinclair isn't just some random philosopher. This is the guy who wrote the book The Jungle in 1906, the book that exposed the meatpacking industry's horrors so vividly that it made America literally sick to its stomach. He meant to show the exploitation of immigrant workers, but America only cared about the contaminated meat they were eating. He famously said, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." Sound familiar? We try to show driver exploitation, but people only care when freight rates affect their Amazon packages, or they see a horrific accident on the news. Sinclair spent months undercover in Chicago's stockyards, watching workers lose fingers, fall into rendering vats, get ground up with the meat. Management knew, inspectors knew, everyone whose salary depended on production just didn't care. Or their salary depended on not rocking the boat. Does that sound familiar? For those in the back, I'll say it a little bit louder. Doesn't that sound eerily familiar? I can't emphasize enough that y'all read this book or listen to it on an audiobook. These scams and power plays aren't new. They've been going on for over a century. This quote that I read, it comes from his later years. He decided he was going to run for the governor of California in 1934 on a platform called EPIC, End Poverty in California. He looked around and saw all the wealth, the breadbasket of American produce, shipping, various industries, and poverty everywhere in sight. He lost that election because every newspaper that was owned by the same interests that he was threatening ran coordinated campaigns against him. And when I read that quote, I literally said, oof, out loud, like it hits. That quote explains a lot about trucking's mathematical lies. Why don't the regulators admit the regulations are ludicrous? Why does the CVSA decide not to enforce English language provisions? Why do certain states still pick and choose what to enforce or not? Where are the labor departments cracking down on misclassified 1099 drivers? Why is this stupid overtime exclusion still allowed? What happened to equal protection under the law? It's not stupidity. It's not ignorance. It's motivated blindness. Every person in this supply chain, from the lot lizard to the lobbyist, has a paycheck that requires them not to see or to ignore what's right in front of them. Everyone's pay depends on letting 2 + 2 equal whatever the hell they want it to. Which brings us to our second quote from Socrates. I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. Socrates sat in the park. He didn't argue with people. He just asked questions of people who claimed that they had knowledge. He wanted to see if their knowledge could stand up to scrutiny and rigorous questioning. Remind you of someone that we just lost? Sinclair couldn't make the meat packers understand. He couldn't make California's establishment understand, but he could document, question, expose, and make people think about what they were accepting. I can't override someone's economic need to not understand, so I ask questions. I can point at undefined terms. I can point out flawed logic. I can ring a bell when I see propaganda disguised as solutions, when I see a new use of short-term pay to buy our long-term entrapment. We have to make everyone just uncomfortable enough with their non-understanding that maybe we start to think a little bit more collectively, and make sure that the bells are ringing loudly when the solutions are just new BS math. Make everybody declare their math out loud. These two quotes together explain this whole episode. Upton Sinclair shows us why the math stays broken, because everybody's paid not to fix it. And Socrates shows us the only way forward. Not preaching, but relentlessly asking, what do you mean by that? Until people can't avoid thinking anymore. And we have to take up both of their mantles and make sure people are not comfortable pretending that this is okay. And these questions are going to be the nails. Big nails, little nails. And we're going to pound them up through the floorboards of this crystal palace that's been built. And I've got a hammer, and so do a bunch of other people that we've been talking to. Uh-oh, I may have found a song to use in an upcoming episode there. Comment on the Facebook page if you have an idea what song that might be. It's been around for a little while. So that's what we're doing today, villains. We're going to ask questions, we're going to line up some nails, and we're going to start tapping them in. Let's hop over to the bulletin board and do some real arithmetic. Let's start with a quick update on my shoulder procedure, since I'm living this equation right now. And I've been through the details in depth before, so I won't bore you with them all over again. But here's the reality. My shoulder procedure in America would have cost about 30 grand, at least 8 grand after insurance covered what they wanted to. But they'd screw around for 6 to 9 months while I'm in pain, hoping I just decide to live with it. If I try not to use insurance, it'd be about 15 grand out of pocket. But that same procedure in the UK, 500 quid. The UK doctor asked me to go ask my US doctor one more time if there's any way that this can just be done in the United States. His quote was, "Surely they can't be so daft as to have you fly all the way to the UK for this." So I asked my US doctor here, and his quote was, "Why aren't you over in England already?" One system counts profit margins, insurance middlemen, and administrative bloat. The other just counts the actual cost of fixing my shoulder. And when 2 plus 2 can equal anything from $650 to $30,000, you know somebody's cooking the books. Here's another little kicker. The English doctor wanted to do the procedure a little differently this time due to where my pain was. So instead of going in from the back, he decided he wanted to go in from the front. And he said, there's going to be some more cost as this one takes a little more work and some more supplies. Oh boy, here we go. The flaw in my plan, right? So I asked how much? 10 quid, he said. He said that's his cost, so that's what he charges me. You can't get a Tylenol for 10 bucks in an American surgery room. The procedure went great, as planned. I slept for about 13 hours straight that night in Birmingham. And here's what's wild about perspective and distance. The Brits I talk to think their NHS, National Health Service, is failing, while Americans are paying 30 grand for shoulder surgeries. Brits think Americans have choice, while what we really have is access. But what does that matter if you can't afford it? Same thing in trucking. We think we're free while being surveilled more than prisoners. Office workers pity us while dying in their cubicles. Everyone sees everyone else's cage except their own. And being 3,500 miles away, it let me see our cage a little more clearly. And it's made of math that doesn't really add up. So speaking of cookbooks and math fraud, our friends in Washington have suddenly discovered an emergency. Non-domiciled CDL holders, foreign drivers everywhere, emergency action required. Now hold on. This is the same system that's been running on exploited labor for years, but now it's a crisis. Where was the emergency when those drivers were keeping shelf stock for 25 cents a mile? Why does it only matter now when Trump's back on an immigration theme and the plight of truckers conveniently fits that narrative? Throw in a couple high-profile crashes and boom, instant crisis. But let's be real, villains. California's been running with roughly 25% non-compliance on their CDLs for years. And 25% non-compliance isn't an oversight. That's a business model. And watch how this gets played out. We're watching it get played out. California is being singled out and punished. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what happened. Many companies have been profiting from cheap labor for decades. The question is, who's been profiting from these dangerous drivers all along? The system required this exploitation to function. It was known, it was built in, and now it's an emergency. When it was convenient for all of us to collectively be exploited, that was fine. But suddenly it's an emergency. And let's make sure we're clear. Like, this wasn't just tiny chameleon carriers. Big carriers, big brokers, big shippers, they've all been cashing in on this manufactured chaos. And while now we watch Duffy and Oklahoma and other states go after the drivers, let's hope that they go after the people who profited from this all along. Don't get me wrong. The efforts to enforce the rules on the side of the road absolutely matter. Get them off the highway if they're not safe, full stop. But Duffy and Washington and everybody else, if you're serious, if this isn't just using trucking as an excuse for some other ends, then go all the way. Prosecute the companies that profited. That's how you really make a difference. At some point, the people who are really doing the exploiting, the people who are really making serious money at this, need to be brought to justice. And interestingly, now on social media, we're seeing another trend, a false narrative forming, that this is all about racism or xenophobia. A bunch of anecdotal posts, drivers who supposedly couldn't speak English for 20 years but drove safely, and now they're being put in the poorhouse. But let's be clear, there's been multiple studies done now, one in 2014, one in 2024, that non-ELP drivers are significantly less safe, on par with drunk or drug drivers. So let's not confuse anecdotal with actual evidence. Let's not hide behind convenient generalizations that aren't true. And that goes for any side of this, because the flip side is also going on, right? People making comments that are blanket statements about certain groups, demographics of people. And we have incredible truckers from all kinds of backgrounds in this country, men and women who deserve not to be lumped in with the unsafe operators and the companies exploiting them, just because it's convenient. We all need to be better than that. I mean, it's funny, the headlines just write the show for me every week. I just take the notes, while the trucking industry and all of the people circling around it perform their individual one-man plays that all I characterize as math without meaning. Finally, villains on the pre-trip, let's do one more math equation, trucking math, that really doesn't add up. This week on LinkedIn, we got a perfect example of what happens when everybody's doing their own math with undefined terms, more math without meaning. Jason Miller posted Craig Fuller's FreightWaves article proposing to cap U.S. carriers at 225,000 carriers. Fuller's math says too many carriers equals market instability, so let's just limit them. Problem solved. For those who don't know, Craig Fuller is the founder and CEO of FreightWaves, basically the Bloomberg of trucking media. Jason Miller, a Michigan State supply chain professor, trucking's favorite academic, who crunches real numbers, publishes real research, he fired back. He said it's the wrong metric, the wrong equation, different variables entirely. And then Ron Miller chimed in on the post with this little gem. And I quote, for the 1,678,987,532nd time, an unfettered free market is always the best way. End quote. So I asked Ron, okay, Ron, what do you mean by unfettered? No hours of service, no CDL requirements, plow under the way stations? And credit where credit's due, Ron actually answered. First part of his answer was, regulations are necessary to protect others from bad actors. But that's subjective. Everyone must play by the same rules. Enforcement is necessary. That said, I believe in free markets. Let the company with the best offering while meeting regulations win. He wants regulations, but they're subjective. Same rules, but he's against caps. Free markets, but within the rules, and the best offering wins, without defining best. Then he adds, not allowing entry due to arbitrary limits creates less competition, higher prices, worse service. And my favorite part, imagine if the government said, we could only have a set number of restaurants or tech brands. No more startups, less innovation, end of the American dream. The next J.B. Hunt might never exist. But here's the thing. Restaurants already face massive barriers. Health permits, zoning, liquor licenses, fire codes. That unfettered free market doesn't exist anywhere, not in restaurants, not in trucking. But here's what kills me about this unfettered free market fantasy. Look at what we actually have. A free market, but interstate commerce regulations. A free market, but CDL requirements. Government licensing. Free markets, but weight limits to protect infrastructure. Free market, but hours of service. The government literally telling you when you can work. Free market, but mandatory insurance minimums. Free market, but drug testing requirements. Free market, but carb emissions that can bankrupt you. And the big one nobody wants to admit, the entire interstate highway system is socialist infrastructure. Well, at least parts of it, if you want to back out some of the toll roads, and that gets even wonkier when the socialist government bodies build the roads and then the government sells them to private interests to sell access to the highways that the government paid to build. Meanwhile, we're using government GPS satellites regulated by the federal government safety standards, and half of them took PPP loans. We've got thousands of pages of fettering. We're fettered 6 ways from Sunday. The question isn't whether to regulate, it's whose regulations benefit whom, and who is the one writing those regulations, and bought by whom. What it tends to mean is, I want the regulations that protect my business model, not the ones that cost me money. It's all 2 + 2 = whatever keeps these particular business models profitable. The moment the free market threatens the bottom line, people are jumping in line for government help. They just don't call it that. Hell, we pull regulations from everywhere but trucking to regulate trucking. We've got maritime laws from the age of sailboats, railroad precedents from steam engines. Half our hours of service regulations come from aviation because apparently driving a truck is like flying a plane. So if we're regulated like pilots, how about we get paid like pilots? And while we're at it, how about pilot training standards? They get 1,500 flight hours minimum, years of education, rigorous testing, ongoing training throughout their careers. We get 3 weeks at a CDL mill and good luck, don't hit anything. They want pilot level regulations with crackerjack box licensing. Starting pilot salary, $80K, seniors making $300 to $400K. Wait, did you say you only wanted the fatigue rules to apply from aviation to trucking, not the compensation models? Or the professional development? Oh, it's funny how selective we get when it costs money. See, I can come up with math just as stupid. The difference is I'm joking. But I digress. And the J.B. Hunt line in there, perfect irony. J.B. Hunt succeeded in a regulated environment, pre-deregulation, and now uses its power to shape the rules. One could argue pulling up the ladder behind them. Meanwhile, Ron defends their right to do it. We don't want to lose out on that next opportunity. Now, I'm not picking on J.B. Hunt here. Ron's the one who picked them as the example. It could have been any big player in trucking or any other industry. Walmart, McDonald's, same story, scale up, lock out, call it freedom. And that's the problem, villains. We're not having a trucking debate. We're having a word game. Everyone's solving different equations with self-serving definitions. Fuller is solving for market control. Jason Miller's solving for data accuracy. Ron Miller's solving for ideological purity. And nobody's solving for driver survival. At least Ron showed his work, even if the terms still lack some clarity, but we can discuss those further productively. And I appreciate the reply, Ron. Thank you for that. Some folks just declare their math correct and expect us to salute it. But that's what we're up against here. Every solution is someone's undefined equation. Every debate uses the same words with different meanings. Meanwhile, out here in the real world, 2 + 2 = broke. We're finding our feet while losing our teeth, just like the Birmingham song. And the underground man had it right, and I'll talk more about him later. Everyone is perfectly rational inside their own delusion. Like that driver who dumps his piss jug in the parking lot. His math works perfectly. Need to piss, plus having a jug, plus having a window to dump it out of, problem solved. He's not counting your shoes stepping in it or the industry's reputation dripping with it. Same deal here. Fuller's cap works perfectly as math if you only count market stability, not the aspiring owner-operators locked out. Ron Miller's qualified freedom works perfectly as ideology. It's abstract enough to feel good about, air quotes, freedom, but it doesn't acknowledge the 1,000 pages of regulations we already have. We're not debating unfettered versus fettered. We've got more fettering than a dominatrix convention. The question isn't whether to regulate, it's whose regulations benefit whom. So what's the real equation? Who's counting the real costs? In the money line, we're going to dig into the real math, all those externalities that I'm touching on. That's the pre-trip for this week. If you spot a defect, let me know. Let's debate it like the meaning of roadworthy. Get that seat adjusted. Let's push the buttons in. We've got work to do. Trans-Carolina Permits is based out of North Carolina. They've been in business since 1977, and they've got a team with a ton of experience in all of our favorite part of trucking, which of course is the government. They provide a portfolio of services for the trucking industry, not to mention they have a compliance program. They'll help you with clearinghouse setup and queries, IFTA and mileage reporting, so your state-by-state mileage, your fuel purchase tracking, and get that wrapped up into a nice little bundle for quarterly filings. They're a one-stop shop for your trucking needs. You can find them on Facebook and LinkedIn, or check out their website, transcarolinapermits.com, or give them a call at 1-800-899-4870.
It's by truckers for truckers. This is the Channel 19 Experience. Let's hit the road.
Welcome back. Let's flip that turn signal on and drop the hammer in the drive line this week. You'll notice I slipped a little change in there. A couple people asked me, why is it called the money line? You don't always just talk about money. And I'm like, fair point. So we're going to change it over to the drive line, since that's line 3, and that's where the driving gets done. So kick back, relax. It's the drive line. Put your foot out the window. No, don't put your foot out the window. And let's knock out some miles here on the drive line. The drive line today isn't about rates or rules. It's about the most dangerous word in trucking: externalities. Costs they create, but you pay. And once you see them, you'll start to see them everywhere. Here's an example. Think about McDonald's. They could have everybody eat in the restaurant, and they could provide porcelain dishes, and then they could pay a dishwasher and have dishwashing machines. But instead, we've got drive-thrus or takeaway. Order on an app, pick it up yourself, or have it delivered. More efficient, right? For them. The externality in this equation, well, at least one of them, there's actually probably 100 of them if we want to really do the math. But just for an example, one of them is the trash. That's your problem now. You took it home. You took the food with you. It's in your car. It's in your truck. Now that trash is going to go somewhere. Might go in a field somewhere, might go in the fuel island dumpster, might go in the garbage can at your house. They externalize the cost onto you. They don't have to hire dishwashers, don't need dishwashing machines. They eat a little bit of cost buying the packaging at bulk, but they don't have to pay for all the garbage. When you look at how many wrappers and boxes and every other thing that goes in there, their dumpsters outside their building are quite small. So a little bit of that trash gets spread out into trash cans all around the country. It saves them billions. Now in trucking, externalities have become an art form. Parking. Everyone taxes truckers, but nobody wants to provide parking. The tickets, the fatigue, the hours wasted searching, all externalized onto you. CDL mills, they're churning out drivers who burn out in months, and they're still paying that debt years later. Carriers got their indentured servant for a few months, and drivers got a pile of debt. Your body, that's probably the biggest externality of it all, the part that doesn't go in the equations. Spine deteriorating, knee shot, heart stressed out, type 2 diabetes. And when you're breaking down at 45 and out of steam, or the statistics will tell us dead at 61, who pays for that? That's being externalized onto you, onto your family, onto disability. Now let's go back for a second to the book I keep bringing up, Notes from the Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's about a man who sees through all this BS, sees how the system really works, and that knowledge, it paralyzes him. Just like every trucker who knows that they're being exploited, but takes the load anyway, who sees the math doesn't add up, but keeps driving. The underground man's curse was being awake while everyone else was sleepwalking through their exploitation. And that's what hurts the most for Dostoevsky and his character in the book, is the knowing that kills you. It's not being able to ignore it. The men of action, the people who don't notice, they just keep doing it. Wake up, put it in gear, roll down the road, survive as best you can. But the men of perception, and women, right? This is just his terminology. The people of perception, they see the bigger picture and go, something is not right with this. And we see it going on in all aspects of trucking, right? Not just in the labor, but the decisions being made, especially in downtimes like this. These last few years have really called a bunch of things into focus like we're seeing today. A good example of that is some bad math that got exposed by Craig Fuller the other day on a video he put out. He just admitted that people are doing bad math, right? Carriers, big and small, are deferring maintenance, deferring replacing vehicles in an effort to survive. They're not putting the expense on the books of fixing some things or trading in trucks and keeping with their typical cycles. They're doing these things to save money to survive. But making today's numbers work by pushing disaster into tomorrow, like with deferred maintenance, that stuff doesn't just disappear, it compounds. You'll pay just later. And same with a driver taking a losing load. I need $500 today, not counting time that gets invested, opportunity cost. Everyone's trying to make the math work by ignoring half of the equation. Now we look at the bigger picture. Uber and other companies in the gig economy, they took this scam mainstream. Be your own boss, they said. But what they're really doing is externalizing everything. Vehicle costs, maintenance, depreciation, insurance, all under the driver. That Uber driver thinks, woo, $20 an hour, look at me go. But then the reality hits after costs, minimum wage or less, your car being destroyed, depreciated. Meanwhile, Uber's stock price through the roof. Uber didn't innovate transportation. They just multiplied the exploitation model the trucking had already perfected. They'll borrow you the money to buy a car. Or better yet, they'll go buy the car and lease you the car. Sound familiar? So what we continue to build in this industry is what the underground man called the Crystal Palace. This perfectly rational system where humans are just cogs in the machine. We're the support beams in this Crystal Palace, holding up our own prison. But humans have a tendency to destroy this palace. We've seen it over the years. And not through organized resistance, through chaos, piss jugs, abandoned trucks. You can't optimize broken human beings into machines. But what they can do is bake that into their models. They can have an escrow account for what to do when you abandon trucks. They even have drivers on standby. They have companies that are on standby to go retrieve these trucks. The other thing that we watch get done is these externalities, these costs, get shifted over onto others, like the government. We need government funding. We need a new program to make parking. Well, what about all the people who are benefiting from the trucking industry? Maybe they should be ponying up for parking of their own. Or who's paying the cost, the real cost of hundreds of thousands of drivers who probably shouldn't have CDLs, who can't speak English proficiently, and it's demonstrable that they're less safe than drunk or drug drivers. American families are paying the price for that. So all this bakes up to what I'm going to call the perfect crime. Non-domiciled CDLs, chameleon carriers, they're not bugs. They're features. When an accident happens, the carrier dissolves, driver disappears. Who pays? Not the shipper. We just needed freight move. Not the brokers. We're just intermediaries. Not the carrier. That was just a contractor. The victims pay, the taxpayers pay, everyone who created the problem gone like smoke. So what are we going to do about it? Like I mentioned, all these questions, ask yourself, ask others. We're pounding nails up through the floorboards. Mike Ritzema came on the show and showed us that wages haven't risen. That's a nail. TJ Graff came on and showed us that there are parts of this industry that think 100% turnover is just the cost of doing business. That's another nail. Will Cook came on and exposed the machinery once again that he does in his books and in his Facebook posts all over the place. Those are all nails. Even Craig Fuller accidentally revealed the truth of how companies are monkeying with the math to stay in business. And those nails are going to come up through the floor and they're going to puncture people's feet at some point here. So the thing that we need to work on, we need to be more like Socrates, asking questions. And it doesn't have to be complicated questions, just asking people, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by some of these words that could have a really wide spectrum of what they mean? And make them define the terms, because that's where the mess is getting made. It's just the nature to generalize and use loose terms. And I have to fight it with myself as well to clarify, what did you mean by that? What was your real premise there? Because once we get all these externalities out on the table and they have to actually be accounted for, a lot of these arguments go away pretty fast and they sound really silly at face value, right? Unfettered free market. It doesn't exist. It's a figment of a textbook. There are forces at work in any market that render, air quotes, free useless. But that's just one example. So here's what my call to action is for all of you. It's to ask people to define their terms. Flesh out what those externalities are. Just like when you're booking a load or thinking about, is it really worth it for me to work at this company or haul this freight or purchase this truck, or where should I buy diesel? You have to look at all the facts, right? I might want to buy diesel here right now, but if I only have 200 pounds of weight, I can't put 200 gallons on, or I'm going to be overweight and there's a scale 20 miles up the road, right? You're thinking about all the factors. It's not just a question of should I buy fuel or not because I like the price. It's more complicated than that. Same with all this other stuff. It's more complicated. So we have to make people define their terms and list all the externalities that are missing from the math that they're showing us. That's what Socrates did. He just went in the park and asked people questions. What do you mean by that? Do you mean this? And you watch people figure out their own logic, and even they'll start to question themselves. But make them define things like shortage, free market. Don't let them do broad generalizations like we've talked about earlier. And we have to be careful not to make broad generalizations of our own, because that's one way that we get marginalized in these discussions. That's why it's so important not to do things like we see on social media. Or that's why I delete some comments that come up on my Facebook page. People wonder, why'd you delete that? You know why? Because it's not helping the equation. Somebody jumping on there and saying a racist and that everybody who wears flip-flops is a bad truck driver or doesn't speak English is not true. We know that. So don't give them an easy way out to marginalize us. The reality is I don't have all the answers. It would be silly for me to say that I do. But what I can do and what I promise to do is strive for better questions. And the underground man knew this. If you start to claim that you have the answer, then you start to become the thing that you fought. It becomes the new institution, the new Crystal Palace. So let's stay in the questions for a while. Every question that you ask is driving a nail up through the floor of that Crystal Palace. It's making people uncomfortable in the Crystal Palace. And once it starts to hurt enough, and we ask enough questions, and there's no comfy place to sit down, then we can start to look at what the real answers might be. And they might look like something totally different. That's why I went to the UK. That's why I'm talking to truckers from all over the world. Because there's other ways of thinking about this other than just the way that we've seen it here. It's really fun. It's interesting to see some of the things in the UK that you just riding along with Matt Rayner. You go, that's a pretty good idea. Maybe we should consider that. And there's no perfect answers here. Nobody's going to be happy with everything. But we owe it to ourselves to explore the possibilities. And in order to do that, first we got to root out some BS in the math. So keep driving those nails, keep asking questions, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. That's the only way out of the underground. So hammer down, villains, keep the shiny side up, and keep counting the real costs. Let's drop it down to line 4 for a quick break, and we'll cap this one off with the post trip. TrueTMS is a cloud-based transportation management system. Being in the cloud makes integrations faster, and you're able to access the platform from anywhere. It has intuitive planning, on-demand reporting and easy order creation, rating, and invoices, which turns tedious admin work into streamlined automated workflows. The folks at 𝗘𝗾𝗵𝗆 have decades of trucking and liquid experience, and they care about this industry. They don't just sell you a product, they're invested in your success. Visit their website, 𝗘𝗾𝗵𝗆s.com, and of course, tell them Channel 19 sent you.
We're talking trucking life, uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories, and the miles in between. From first jobs to last hauls, the laughs that kept us going, and the lessons that left a mark.
Well, villains, that's just about going to do it for this week's run. Quick shout outs this week. Will Cook and his Facebook page, Driver's Perspective. TJ Graff from Star Behaviors. Go take his free assessment. See if you're a good fit for being a trucker. Big Cal at Trucking with Coffee and Cal. His mugs are on the way to him. I don't think they got delivered yet. I think they're still on the way. So get your orders in. Reach out to Cal. Get on the page. He's going to run out fast. So you might have to get on batch 2 or something. And Chris Barber from the Freedom Convoy up in Canada in 2022. He's on his way to Ottawa this week. Him and Tamara, they've got their sentencing hearing this week. So send some prayers their way. You can support them, cbtruckingltd.ca. Of course, Mike Rietzema from Superior Trucking Payroll Service, his website, truckingpayroll.com. Don't forget about his podcast. You can find links to those episodes over on his website as well. Deb Labrie. I got to talk to Deb a little bit while I was in Birmingham, which was awesome. That was fun. Thanks for calling. I had a wonderful conversation talking about podcasting and all kinds of stuff. So check out her page, womantrucker.com. And Deb released another trucking poem this week, so go check that out. I got to find that and post it on my page, so I'll get that over to you. And also Bobby McGee and her blog, A Hard Shell Life, hardshelllife.blogspot.com. She had another killer article this week. Really some great perspective on what it's like to be the spouse of a trucker. So awesome. I shared that out on LinkedIn. It's really, really touching blog to read. Also, it's October now. Wow, we're in Q4. So we've got those October truck shows that are almost here. Barry Trahan's 3rd annual Louisiana Truck Show down in Rayne, Louisiana. We got Lee Owens, American Truckers Jubilee in Searcy, Arkansas. Both of those are running October 24th and 25th, so at the end of the month here. Check out the rest of the upcoming truck shows at thetruckshowlist.com. And before I go, let me tell you one last story. So when I was on the way back, so I went to the Aston Villa versus Bologna soccer match on Thursday night. And on the way back, so everybody piles out of the stadium. There's 50,000 people in the stadium, and there's a train that runs like every 20 minutes that fits 200 people. So you do the math, right? Like it's not a model of efficiency. It wasn't really designed for that, but that's just part of the fun. But anyway, we finally get on the train, and there's a whole kinds of joking and conversations, and everybody's having a good time. Now, the one nice thing is that people aren't really drunk like they used to be, because you can't drink that much at the stadium. You can only drink it in the concourses. You can't drink it at your seat. So people they kind of get throttled. You can either drink or you can go watch the football match, sorry. But you really can't do both. And if you were going to sit in the concourse and just drink, you might as well just go to the bar and not go to the game. Why buy the ticket? So anyway, so people are, they got a little bit of happiness on, but they're not out of control. After we get on the train, there's various discussions going on. And then at one point, half of the train car was on erupted in some chanting/singing. And if you ever watched an English football match, they love to chant and they love to sing. So anyway, one of the chants was F. Keir Starmer, their current prime minister. One of the other chants was, we won World Wars 1 and 2, but not a World Cup since 1962. And at one point they kind of looked at me a little funny because I was one of the few people who wasn't really joining in, especially on that end of the car. And so one guy asked me, what's your deal? And it was funny. He made a comment. He's like, you look like you have a proper job. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. But anyway, I told him, my response was, it's not my fight. That's why I'm not singing about your immigration problems. I don't live here. I'm not British. I don't know what your problem is. and I don't know who's to blame or who should be solving it or not. And they could tell immediately by my accent that I was American, and they could appreciate the fact that I wasn't singing. What would be the point? It's not, I mean, other than I just want to chant with somebody too. I don't have I don't have a side in this. I was just observing and enjoying the moment of people interacting with one another and jumping from politically charged chanting to mutual misery chanting and singing. And even before the match, before I went up there, I ate at a restaurant called 𝗘𝗾𝗄𝗋𝗃 down in the city center. And I was having a proper English breakfast, and some Birmingham City Blues fans saw my Aston Villa shirt, and they cringed and they made their comments. There's about 150 years of hatred between the Blues and Aston Villa, but we could still agree, even after they made their negative comments about Aston Villa, that screw Bologna. We know you're our enemy. We know that we mutually don't like one another, but anyone's better than cheering for the Italians to win. So, and that's who the opponent was that night. And even beyond that, the conversation got funny because next thing you know, we're talking about baseball and American football. And one other thing we could agree on besides screw Bologna, we could all agree, screw the New York Yankees. I'm from Minnesota. The Minnesota Twins are my team, and we're a small market team. And just inherently, even though they're only baseball fans from a distance, we could all agree on the Yankees representing everything wrong with purchase dominance. And it got me all this got me thinking about, when's the last time American truckers sang together about anything? When's the last time we even saw each other's faces at a truck stop instead of being isolated in our cabs? And like I said, the system needs us isolated. You can't organize if you never meet. You can't compare notes if you're always alone. And it reminded me of why the CB radio was so important. And you look at the difference in some of the things that happened when everybody's mode of communication was on the CB radio and trucking. And it made me think about how different things might be if we had ways to communicate a little better. So I think one of the important parts here is finding our collective voices together. And sometimes that singing is going to be about what we've lost together, but at least we'd be singing together. Next week on episode 32, I'll still be over in England. I'm going to be riding along with Matt Rayner, seeing the British trucking firsthand. I plan to hit Lincoln. I'm going to see the Magna Carta document, that original freedom document that everybody's heard of. But what's in it might surprise you. And what other document is stored there alongside it that maybe is more significant. I'm also visiting Iron Bridge, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, which is now a valley of museums, and see what I can understand from a different time period, but the same equation, same workers becoming externalities, a different accent, a different flag, but these patterns repeat themselves. And speaking of predictable patterns, Kodiak, the autonomous trucking technology company, they went public this week, right as the driver shortage emergency is starting to pick up heat. And if you'll remember, 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀𝗵𝗲𝗆, he called that out months ago. But we'll save that mathematical magic trick for next time. In the meantime, keep driving nails, keep asking questions, keep finding each other in the isolation. Watch out for the squawkers, the ones who complain without questioning, who make noise without meaning. Don't let them drown out the real work of exposing the mathematics of BS. If you want to be a part of the conversation, reach out to me, inbox at channel19experience.com. Check out our website. Stay safe, everybody. Ask questions even when it hurts. That's the only way out of the underground. Thank you for having me in the jump seat with you one more time. We've got work to do.
This has been the Channel 19 Experience. If it's about trucking, we're talking about it. All uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories. But we talk about the world of trucking today, too. Everything from legislation to lane changes in the industry. We got it covered. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back at the ranch soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on social media at Channel 19 Experience and the website at www.channel19experience.com. That's channel and the numbers 19. See you down the road.